About 3 weeks ago, I bought this 2013 Toyota Sienna to build out, to live out of full-time. And I've got a few things built out here, but I have not built out the kitchen yet, which means I have not been cooking for myself, other than just reheating a few little things here and there. But that ends today. Today I want to cook my first meal here in my new-to-me van because I'm getting hungry. So welcome if you're new here. My name is Scott and this is my YouTube channel, StaticCampervan. And over the last 9 years I have been living out of a different van, a van that I had a little kitchen set up in, and it was quite easy to cook all my own meals, which is what I prefer to do. But over the last 3 weeks here, moving into this van and kind of starting all over again, the food situation has been a bit difficult for me. I've been eating things like pre-made pastas that I've just been reheating and things like that. It's not been great for me. So I need to get back to cooking my own meals, which is what I want to be doing, what I actually enjoy doing. So today I thought I'd make some chili, and I have kind of a quick version of making chili. So this is not going to be a real full-on cooking video, but I do want to make something at least mostly from scratch. So that's what I plan on doing here, but I do have a couple of little things I need to do before I can get to cooking because I don't have a real kitchen set up here in this van. This is as far as I've got on the build out of my kitchen area here. There's not much so far. I've just got a little tabletop made out of some plywood and a little bit of a backsplash, again made out of plywood. And this is a little bit of an area of concern because obviously plywood is flammable. But I think even more worrying is this headliner up here. Fabric and heat don't go very well, so this is a reason why I have not been doing any cooking so far. That's why I've just been doing some light reheating of some foods that I've bought at the grocery store, in fear of maybe lighting the van up and not in a good way. No, I think I have solutions for both of these issues. One was very easy. The other one was easy but a little bit more expensive. The first one is I just bought some heat shield material, and this is a heat shield material that is sold for vehicles. They use this in engine bays, on firewalls, things like that, just to deflect some of the heat from the engine away from anything sensitive. And I have used some of this material in the past. My old van had a little bit of a design mistake, a big design mistake on my part, where I had ran some wiring where I had eventually put my stove directly under. And so in fear of lighting up the wiring that was running on the ceiling, I bought some heat shield material that was very similar to this and just stuck it up on the ceiling. And it did a great job. It did an amazingly great job. Never had any trouble with melting the wiring. I was actually quite surprised at how well this stuff worked. Now this is a little bit different than the heat shield that I had bought before for the other van, but I think it's mainly just the same thing. It's a peel and stick material, so I should be able to easily just apply this to the ceiling right above where I'm going to have my stove here, and hopefully it works as well as the old heat shield material did. Now, one thing I noticed with the old heat shield material that I used in the last van was that it stuck up on the ceiling really easily at first, but then the adhesive kind of let loose very quickly. So I did have to come back through and just re-stick it. I used some contact cement for that, and so that solved the problem. I'm guessing that this might stick a little bit better here in this application because I am sticking it to fabric, so I'm guessing it's probably going to stick a little bit better. But also I should just mention that this is a temporary solution. I'm not expecting this to be any kind of long-term solution. Once I get into building out the kitchen here on this side, I think I will eventually take out the headliner and just remove it completely. So this is just a little quick fix just so I can start cooking again, because I've been going crazy not being able to cook for myself. Normally I don't go out to eat, and so it's been a little bit of a difficulty just trying to feed myself. So I'm just doing a few little things here just so that I can kind of get back to some normalcy for me. That last van that I had was set up really well for me, and the kitchen was set up really well too. I was able to really cook almost anything that I wanted. You know, if I wanted pizza, if I wanted tacos, whatever it was that I wanted, I was able to make. So as long as I can get back to cooking a little bit, I don't expect to be cooking pizza here, but as long as I can get back to cooking a little bit for myself, I'm going to be much happier and be feeling much better. So that's what I'm after here. So this is all just temporary. It's all just temporary. Trying to decide where I want to put this exactly, because I don't really know where anything is going to be setting as far as the stove and all. But that'll probably be good right there. And let's see how this sticks. These lights and vents don't work anymore. I've disabled them, so I'm okay with covering them up. Like I said, this headliner will get permanently removed. So this might look a little bit funny, but as long as we get some safety going on, I don't really care what it looks like. Well, I think that's satisfactory. It's sticking fairly well. It looks a little goofy, but you know, this is all about safety. So again, who cares what it looks like? Now, the only thing I'm noticing here is that the edges are a little bit frayed, and this is a fiberglass material, so I don't like to see that because I don't want to have any little bits of fiberglass falling down into my food. So I think I'm going to cover up the edges with some aluminum tape. This is some duct working tape, and being that it is aluminum, it's heat resistant on its own. I did think about just using this because I had it, but this is awfully expensive. This roll of aluminum tape was, I think, about 3 times the cost of this heat shield material. So that's why I just went ahead and ordered this. I found this on Amazon. When I had bought it originally for my other van, I just found it at a auto parts store. But in looking around, it was about, I don't know, half the price at least to buy it from Amazon. So that's why I just bought this from Amazon this time. So I think covering up the edges will kind of help keep the fraying down. And also, I'm not real confident that this is going to stay stuck up here just because of my experience with the last one. So covering up the edges will make me feel better all the way around here. If you've never used this aluminum tape, you do have to be very careful with it because it is real aluminum, so real metal, and it is sharp. It will cut you if you're not careful, and you do have to peel this backing off of it. So it's kind of easy to cut yourself with this. Some of the brands are a little more sharp than others. This one's not too bad, but this one has cut me. This was a very big roll at one time back when I bought it, but this stuff is so useful. I've used it on a number of things. This is another reason why I didn't want to waste the whole roll up here on this and why I just bought that heat shield material. But yeah, if you haven't used this before, you'll find all kinds of uses for it. I don't know if you know this, but in the world of van building, anything that is meant to be temporary can be really ugly. That's true. So that was the easy fix. The harder thing to sort out is my stove. And this is the stove I've been using for the last 3 years or so. And it's been just a rock solid stove for me. It's just not given me any trouble. And it was only about $25. I bought it off of the Home Depot website. And just a fantastic price, given, you know, especially given the fact that it's just not given me any trouble at all over all the years. I did make some little modifications to it. I added some feet to it that were different from the feet that it came with, just so that I would be able to adjust the stove a little bit for the times that the van is not perfectly level, which is pretty much all the time. So it's been a great stove. It's worked well for me. The trouble is this stove is really meant to be outside. It's an outside type stove. And I used it in my old van because I really didn't have any flammable materials around it. Although the little tabletop that I had on it was technically flammable. So it's not really a stove that I want to use in this van. I think the fact that it is a 15,000 BTU output stove means that it's going to put out a lot of heat that may actually be more than this little heat shield that I've put up here is able to withstand. At least, you know, maybe the heat might get around it. I probably should have bought a little bigger heat shield, but this one was cheap and it was going to be delivered quickly, and so that's why I chose it. I could come back and add a little bit more if need be in the future, but I think if I use this stove, it's definitely going to be a little bit too much heat, a little bit too much flame, and not only just up above it. The problem with this stove is that because it's really meant to be outside, it does put out a lot of heat down below. There's no heat shielding on the stove underneath, and so as soon as you run it, and especially when you have a larger pot on it, it does throw a lot of heat down below. So if I were to use the stove on this piece of plywood, I think this piece of plywood would catch fire within the first few minutes. So this is not the stove I want to be using. So I have wrapped this up, and I'm not going to throw it out. I'm going to hold on to the stove, but I've wrapped this up and set it aside, and I've actually bought myself a brand new stove. So this is my new stove. This is a dual fuel stove made by Gas One. And I picked this stove because, one, I thought that it would work well in this situation here, but also I used to own an earlier version of this stove and I really liked it, save for one feature. The earlier versions of this stove from Gas One, like the one that I had a much different propane regulator, and they were an issue. They were a problem. And I was very vocal with Gas One about it. In fact, I had to buy 3 different regulators for that old stove I had, and I just got tired of replacing them. They obviously were all bad. It was just a bad design. And so that was the reason why I gave up on that stove. Other than that, I really liked the stove. It worked really well for me. Now this is a dual fuel stove, so it'll run off of either propane if you attach this propane regulator, or it will run off of the little butane canisters. And I don't use butane. I don't like those butane canisters. I don't like the way butane works. So I always run everything off of propane, and since that was the issue with the old stove, that's why I gave up on it. I'm hoping that this new regulator is going to be more robust and I'm not going to have any trouble with it. Time will tell. As far as the rest of the stove, I really was sad to give up on the stove, the last one I had, because it works great. There are some major differences between this stove and my old stove that I was just showing you. The old stove, of course, was open. This one has metal all the way around, so it does have kind of heat shielding built into it. So when I run it, it doesn't get the surface very hot because it's got a metal bottom on it, as well as the little drip tray is metal, so that does deflect the heat up instead of down. The drip tray also has this included wind deflector, and I found that was a really good thing when I used the old one. And that was kind of my issue with my last stove. My last stove didn't have any wind protection at all. Meant that it was very hard to cook with my door open, which is my preference. I like to cook with my door open as often as I can. So I'm hoping that this stove is all fixed. The problems that Gas One has had with the old regulators is fixed. We'll see. Time will tell. Let's fire this thing up and actually do some cooking on it, because as I said before, I've really just been using this to reheat some food. So today we're actually going to cook something that I really want to eat and is going to fill me up, because again, I'm hungry. I'm extra hungry right now. So I'm parked here at a little bit of an angle because I'm parked on a city streets, and you know, they crown the city streets to kind of shed rain off. So that means that the stove is kind of pitched toward me. Now my old stove, of course, I had those movable feet so that I could just adjust and make up a little bit of a difference. Since this doesn't have movable feet, I'm just going to shim it up with some magnets. Probably not the best thing to use because magnets lose their magnetic abilities if they get warm. So there it is. I'm just going to put it under the feet. just to try to, well, shim it up a little bit. And that should work a little bit. Not quite level, but good enough. I've got this little enamel on cast iron pot, and it's pretty slippery when I put it on a stove like this. I guess this would be enamel too, wouldn't it? And I think this pot needs to be cleaned a little bit better. I didn't realize that till just now. Just give me a pass on that one, okay? I've got really no kitchen set up and not much of a sink set up over here, so it's been a bit of a struggle cooking. So we're going to be making some chili. It's something that I make quite often. One, because I really like it, and two, because it's a fairly cost-effective meal. For just a few dollars, you can get a lot of food. So it's one of my favorite things to cook, but also eat lately. Now I'm going to try to make a double batch here, and I don't ever really use recipes when I'm cooking, and I think that especially with chili, you don't really need a recipe. So I'm just taking some things that I like and throwing them in a pot. And I think that that's really the best way to approach chili making. So I've got some crushed tomatoes, and I've also got some beans. And now normally I don't like to eat kidney beans, but they are probably a little bit better nutritionally than pinto beans, which is what I normally use, or some other type of bean that is close to pinto beans. But I'm going to go ahead and use both of these in this pot here today, just to change it up a little bit. I do have some chili powder I'm going to add, and I'm going to start with some beef. So let me get that out of the fridge, and we'll brown that off, and then add the chili powder and then all the other ingredients. Now this is just regular old 80/20 ground beef. I'm just cooking it with a little bit of salt. I always salt as I go. And I always just leave the fat in if I'm using a grass-fed ground beef like I am today. I don't really mind the fat of that, but if you're kind of averse to the fat, you can always drain some off. Obviously the 80/20 beef is going to be a bit fatty. So while I'm waiting for that to brown up a little bit, I've opened up my cans of tomato and beans. And what I do with the beans is I just drain off the liquid. If you like your chili a little bit runnier, you can just dump all the beans and the liquid in. I kind of like my chili to be a little more hearty, a little more heavy. So that's why I just have drained off the liquid on them. And once that gets a little bit more brown, I'm just going to add in my chili powder. I'm using some Hatch New Mexico chili powder. And I'm using a brand that is strictly just chilies. There's no fillers, there's no anti-caking agents in it. It's just chili powder. That's what I kind of prefer. So there's a couple of brands that I like with chili powder, and I'm a little bit picky with ingredients. You might can tell. So I really like this one because it's just got a really nice chili flavor. I don't need all that extra stuff in it. I don't really know how to pronounce that. Los Chilenos, is it? I don't know, but that's one of the brands that I like. I forget the other brand that I like. Seems like when I move around a little bit, sometimes I find one and not the other, so you may find different brands in your area. And this is actually looking like it's all browned up enough. It's almost mostly cooked through, so I'm going to add the chili in because I want to toast the chili off. And this is the part where maybe you might want some recommendations on how much chili to add. I like my chili to be fairly spicy, so I go in fairly heavy with the chili. And what I'm looking for, since I'm not using any kind of measurements, is I'm really just looking to coat all of the meats so that all of the meat has a nice coating of chili all the way around it. If I do it that way, I usually have enough chili. You can always come back and just add a little more chili later on, but toasting it off is always a good idea because you'll get a little bit better flavor out of it. So you always want to get a little bit of the chili in and toast it off like this before you move on to the next step. So this looks pretty good to me, but it's all to taste. So, you know, you can add a little more or a little less depending on how spicy you like your chili. I think that this is an R, not an N. So this is not Los Chilenos, this is Los Chileros, right? Never mind my terrible accent. It's not important. Just buy whatever chili you are comfortable with. I just like this stuff because it's just chili and nothing else. But you know, anything is good. Again, we're not using a recipe here. We're just throwing stuff that we like the taste of into the pot. And I'm also going to add in some of this Mexican seasoning. This is a little more chili powder as well as some garlic and cumin. And I kind of need this because I don't have any fresh garlic at the moment. And cumin, of course, is a very chili flavor. If you don't have cumin in your chili, then it kind of seems like it's missing something. So this will kind of take care of that. I very rarely add onion to my chili. I very rarely cook with onion. I've got some issues with onion, so that's not something I ever put in mine, but obviously you could put it in yours. Now I'm just going to toast up those spices a little bit, and then we are ready for our tomato and the cans of beans. And this is the easy part of this, is that we just dump everything in. And don't do like I'm doing and use too small of a pot for how much food that you have to cook. I couldn't find my larger pot. It's somewhere under my bed, but moving into this van, everything's just everywhere. And it's somewhere under there, I know, but I'm just not sure where it is. So I kind of gave up looking for it. And I was thinking that this pot would be just barely big enough, but, well, maybe it is just barely big enough. I was going to say it's just barely not big enough, but maybe it will be. At this point, I'm just going to simmer this for a few minutes just to try to get all those flavors to meld together. But the meat was pretty much cooked, so it'll be done within just a few minutes. So this is why this is one of my favorite things to make, because I get a lot of food and I can make this really, really quickly. Even after a long day of working and I'm just tired and I want something very quick to eat, this is a really quick and easy thing for me to put together and make. So I've been making a lot of this, but I haven't been able to make any of this in quite a little while now. Well, at least 3 weeks. So I am very excited for this to finish, so that I can finally eat my first meal here in my new van. One big improvement with this new stove versus my old stove is the fact that this stove has a built-in igniter. So when you want to turn it on, you just turn the gas over and hit the igniter and it fires right up. That's a pretty nice little feature that I've been missing for a long time. I've been using regular lighters and electronic lighters with my old stove. That's probably not a good place for that anymore, is it? Right above the heat. We'll find a new place for that lighter. So I'm happy to have the igniter again. One thing I should point out to you is this regulator assembly is set in this direction like this because it's meant to hold a little green propane bottle up in that kind of orientation. I really don't like using green propane bottles. I am using one right now just because the van's not really set up, but eventually I'll move over and start using my bulk propane tank. It's a big two gallon propane tank. But in the meantime, I'm just using the green bottle. And how I've got this set up is I have an extra hose on this system here. So this hose did not come with the stove here. The regulator is just this arm and the regulator head. And to that, I have put this little hose on. I like this hose because it has a shutoff valve built into it. So when I'm ready to get done cooking, like this is almost ready for me to just turn the heat off, what I will do is I'll just turn the gas off on this, which relieves the pressure on the line and the regulator, which I think is important. So that means that there's not going to be any chance that there's any gas left in the line, just for safety reasons, as well as if I did happen to come over and bump the control knob here, I'm not going to release gas into my van. Now I do have pretty good ventilation, which I'm still working on right now, but You see that just went out since I shut the hose off here on this side. So I am still working on the ventilation here, but I've got pretty good ventilation, so it's not really an issue to use this. And yes, I do have a CO meter. Yes, I am watching it. This hasn't registered anything on my CO meter yet. So we'll see if actually doing real cooking does some, it shows up on the CO meter, but so far with just reheating food, it hasn't yet. But if you're interested in one of these little hoses, you can find these at a home center. I bought this at Home Depot in the plumbing section. So plumbers use these hoses for their torches. So if they're trying to do some brazing, they have an extension hose to be able to set their propane tanks out away from whatever they're working on and be able to actually use their torch away easily. So I'm just repurposing it for this, and I think it works really well for that. It is kind of a thin hose, so I don't know how long that they last, but I had one of these before, actually with my old gas one stove, and it lasted quite a while. That is, it lasted a lot longer than the old regulator assembly on that old stove. So I like these hoses, and they're about 25 to 30 bucks, so a little bit expensive, but they do seem to hold up pretty well. Yeah, I think we're all done. You see this barely fits here in this pot, but it made it, and I didn't boil anything over. I did taste this and add a little bit of extra salt. That's all it really seemed to need. I think it actually could have used some more chili powder, so I probably used about 2 tablespoons altogether, but I would actually prefer it to be even more spicy, but it's actually pretty tasty. I am very happy that I can finally start doing a little bit of cooking here. Even though the kitchen is not really up and running, at least I'm able to make some simple things like my little chili dish here. And it is a very good feeling to finally get back to a place where I can do more of my cooking whenever I get hungry. I've been so hungry lately because I just haven't had a good place to set up and do my cooking. I have been reheating food with the stove on top of my fridge, which is obviously not very ideal. So this is a great little setup. Of course, I've got a lot more work to do here on this side, but that will all come in time. And one thing that we didn't do today, we didn't make a cup of coffee here, did we? This setup will probably make my coffee brewing a lot easier too, so there's another little plus that I'm happy about. I wasn't actually thinking about that when I started this, but I am thinking about that now. I think though I'm going to get to my dinner and we'll have to make coffee another day, so maybe we'll do a first cup of coffee in the new van on the next video. How about that? Thanks for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it.